Assalamu alaikum. This is me, Rumesa Qureshi, and you're watching DTVNN. A special report covered by our YouTube channel, DTVNN, courtesy of Ethnic Media Services, national briefing on how green is my city, how trees and parks add years to longevity. A national Zoom meeting was held on Friday, December 1st, 2023. And let's watch the Zoom meeting and listen from the professionals and experts.
Welcome. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's briefing. I'm Pilar Marrero, Associate Editor for Ethnic Media Services. The topic today is How Green is My City? How Trees and Parks Add Years to Longevity. As many of our cities have grown, trees and green space are often seen as little more than beautification strategies. Now we know that tree canopy and park space directly affect our health and our survival on Earth. Freeways and palm trees have historically defined Los Angeles as the second largest city in the United States. But new research and the realities of climate change have led to a push for more and better green space and efforts to address inequities in access to parks and shade. Research by UCLA's Fielding School of Public Health found that increasing urban greening, tree canopy, and park space, particularly in green-poor areas, could add nearly 1 million years of life expectancy across Los Angeles County and dramatically improve life for low-income residents of color. Today, our panelists will explore Los Angeles as a case study in the importance of urban greening, explain the link between green space and human health, and map out what it will take to implement changes that benefit the whole city, as an example for other cities across the country. Our speakers include Michael Jarrett, professor at the UCLA Department of Environmental Health Sciences, and co-director at the Center for Health Climate Solutions, Fielding School of Public Health. Rachel Malloridge, City Forest Officer for the City of Los Angeles. Marcos Trinidad, Senior Director of Forestry at Tree People. Biz Sang, Project Manager at the Los Angeles Neighborhood Land Trust. And John Christensen, Adjunct Assistant Professor at the UCLA Institute of the Environment, Luskin Center for Innovation, and Laboratory for Environmental Narrative Strategies. We ask speakers to speak slowly for our interpreters in Spanish, Mandarin, and Korean, and we ask reporters to enter questions in the chat. Our speakers are also encouraged to answer questions in the chat throughout the conference if you can. We will send a video of today's briefing and expanded bios with contact information for each speaker to all participants later today. Okay, and now we are welcoming our very first City Forest Officer of the City of Los Angeles. Welcome, Rachel Malloridge, and thank you for being with us.
Pilar, I'm sorry to interrupt. I wonder if we could go back to our original order. Michael's here now.
Okay, sounds good. Let's go to the original order. I was looking at my, see if he was on. So UCLA Professor Michael Jarrett, welcome. Hello.
Michael?
Michael, are you on?
I think you're on mute.
Still, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
Okay.
but we don't see the slides.
You don't see the slides. Okay.
We see your calendar.
Okay. Let me try again.
Okay.
I can also run them if it's easier.
Yeah, that might be easier if you don't mind.
Thank you, Jessica.
It's not working, but let me try this one more time. Okay, do you see it now?
Yes.
Thank you. So I want to talk to you today about the associations between green space, tree canopy, and parks with life expectancy in neighborhoods of Los Angeles. This is work that was done in collaboration with the Prevention Institute. It was really a wonderful collaboration, which really showed, I think, the power of community-based research.
I think Jessica's running. Oh, there it is. Okay.
And for anybody that wants to see the full paper, it's here. And I'll just do a shout out to my colleagues at the Prevention Institute, Manuel Avaleta, Alba Yanez, and Jasdeep Baines. When we look at the evidence on green space and health, we can see that contact with nature, both green and blue spaces, so parks, coastal areas, trees, a wide range of human health benefits. And evidence from Los Angeles suggests that green spaces and park access is worse in areas where there are low incomes or large populations of Latinx, Black, and Asian people. The quality of the parks is also worse in these socially disadvantaged areas. So the proposition is that if the parks are unevenly distributed, but they do promote health, that some of the population inequalities that we see in Los Angeles are due to these inequalities in park access. If we look at the human timeline, it's good to be reminded that we evolved in nature, and it's really just been very recently that we've moved into cities. And this has spurred several theories about why nature might be good for our health. The most well-known is by E.O. Wilson, the Harvard ecologist, who coined the term biophilia, meaning that we evolved in nature, so there's an inherent love for nature, trust for nature, there's evolution, so we've adapted to natural stimuli, not artificial input, and that has made us genetically predisposed to react positively to nature. Environmental psychologist Roger Ehrlich built on this with the stress reduction theory. So we have this immediate response. It's not conscious when we see nature. There's stress recovery and relaxation. So we see the savanna, vegetation, trees, and we're prepared to react to nature, but not to build settings. This also has been expanded by the Kaplans, who've said that there's attention restoration. So there's a universal meaning to nature, to people, and general positive values. And there are cognitive mechanisms. And we all know when we're in a modern office how demanding it can be to try to focus, whereas we have this innate fascination when we're in contact with nature. So when we look at the literature, we can see that there's a tremendous amount of evidence that suggests that we have reduced attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity disorder, reduced mortality, reduced cardiovascular illness and respiratory illness, and reduced depression when there's higher contact with nature or a better access. We also see that pregnancy outcomes are improved, so preterm births go down, low birth weights go down, well-being and happiness as measured by validated scales goes up. Cognitive development and brain function in children has also been shown to be improved as academic performance. So against this backdrop, we initiated this collaborative project with the Prevention Institute to assess the association between life expectancy and access to parks, green space, and tree canopy in neighborhoods of Los Angeles. And we hypothesized that life expectancy will have a positive association with measures of green space and parks, and that parks will have a larger impact on life expectancy in areas where without much green space or tree canopy. When we look at life expectancy, there are many different determinants that are listed here. You can see that environmentally, there are negative ones like air pollution, lifestyle factors like smoking, obesity, physical inactivity. I won't go into the details, but I can say that we characterize all of these factors in our statistical model to try to hone in on what impact green space particularly had. This research was made possible by work that was done by the Center for Health, National Health Statistics, the CDC, and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, who developed these very small area, these are known as census tracts, estimates of life expectancy. And across Los Angeles, it goes from 68 to 93 years. So if we're somewhere in the south central area, it's about 68 years. When we go up into Malibu, it goes up to 93 years. And you can see that when we look at the satellite retrieval at 0.6 of a meter resolution for green space, that there's a lot of variability. And you can see how that plays out in a residential neighborhood on this slide. You can also see that the park need is unevenly distributed, and at least visually, it looks like it's correlated with life expectancy. So when we did our statistical models, we found very consistent associations between the presence of tree canopy and life expectancy. So more trees, we saw increases in life expectancy. More green space as measured by that satellite image. We also saw that. And I think this is really important and fascinating that when we looked at the impact of parks in areas that did not have much tree canopy or green space, we see a very strong linear influence on life expectancy. But in areas that are already very leafy, say like Brentwood or parts of West Los Angeles, we can see that there's really not a lot of impact when there's already a lot of green space. And this has implications, which I'll talk in a minute. So when we look at quantifying, the effects were quite modest. They were adding maybe 2 to 4 months of life expectancy, depending on which variable we looked at. But when we sum that up across the large population of Los Angeles County, it adds more than 171,000 years of life expectancy. And there's a real environmental justice implication here because many of the neighborhoods that are underserved for parks and green space are populated by Black and Latinx residents. About 122,000 or almost 123,000 of those life expectancy years gained if we brought everyone up to the county level median or about the average of green space would go to Latinx and Black residents. And when we think about the interaction between parks and green space, this highlights the importance of improving parks in areas without much green space. And these are oftentimes areas that are poor and have large populations of Black and Latinx people. For anybody that's interested, the Prevention Institute did a tremendous job with an park advocacy toolkit. So you can go to their website and get this if you want to start using this in any of your research or reporting. I just want to thank the funders and the people that shared data with us and the Prevention Institute for their leadership on this project. Thanks very much, and I look forward to our discussions.
Thank you, Professor Jarrett.
So Laura, could
That
I just ask Dr. Jarrett one follow-up question? Didn't you find a larger effect for if you increase the tree canopy and the green space in those neighborhoods?
Yeah, so the tree canopy was the strongest effect. It was slightly larger than green space, but the green space measure is an aggregate measure of both tree canopy and all other things like grasses and shrubs. So some portion, there's a fairly high correlation between those two factors. So it is hard to parse out the specific effect of trees, but definitely the trees themselves had a strong impact.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Because we started late, we're going to go to the next speaker. And if you can answer a question in the chat, Professor Jarrett, there's a question by Sunita there. But I'm going to move on and invite Rachel Malleridge, who is the Chief Forest Officer for the City of LA, who's going to talk to us about what she's doing and why she is the first person in this position. Rachel, welcome.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me. And I really appreciate that we were able to have Dr. Jarrett go first and lay the case so important, of why trees might be important for us to be looking at as the city. So I am the first city forest officer for the city of LA. I started in this role in 2019, and I oversee the Office of Forest Management that's housed within the Board of Public Works within the city. And we look at collaborating with other departments and ensuring that the city is enacting policies and practices that are going to help ensure that we have more tree canopy, healthier tree canopy for our residents. So one of the big projects that we're working on is our urban forest management plan. So you heard about the importance of trees with the prior speaker and all the health benefits that could be provided to our residents if we made sure that we had tree canopy in all of our neighborhoods. But we really need to have healthy trees in those neighborhoods and have trees live their full lifespan in place in order to achieve those benefits. And so in our office, we talk about what I refer to as the 4 pillars of urban forest management for the city of LA. And those are, which is the one that people frequently think of, let's plant more trees. But the others are equally important. If you don't have all 4, you don't have a healthy urban forest. So we have planting is 1, maintenance. How are we taking care of the existing trees in our public right-of-way, our street trees, and in our parks? How are we preserving? So preservation is the 3rd one. How are we preserving existing trees in place when we have new construction, when we have new development? In general, how are we keeping trees in place so that they continue to provide those tremendous benefits to residents? And the 4th one is engagement. And that's acknowledging that in a city, people are a huge part of the urban forest. They can either help the trees be healthy and stay in place, or it can have negative impacts. And a lot of people have feelings about trees in their communities. I don't get a lot of feedback on, what maybe another piece of infrastructure like a fire hydrant or a street light. People may care if those work or don't work, but they don't care as much what they look like. But trees, people have a strong opinion about what kinds of trees and how those trees behave in their neighborhoods. And so this engagement pillar, we're looking at, again, educating residents on things like why trees are important for their neighborhoods. We're also listening about what's important to them. What are the aspects of the urban forest or benefits that trees provide that are important to them, and how can we design the city around them, the streetscape around them, to better support the look and feel of the neighborhood and the benefits that they care about. And then, so it's this back and forth, some education and kind of outreach, and then it's also listening to our neighborhoods so that we're designing together what that urban forest looks like and ensuring that it really meets the needs of our residents. So those are the 4 areas: planting, maintenance, preservation, and engagement that we as a city want to make sure that we're doing really well. So we're developing this first urban forest management plan, which we're hoping to complete by 2025. And this document will provide a vision for the future and be our roadmap of how we're going to achieve that vision. How are we going to do all those 4 areas really well? How are we going to use research to guide decision making? How are we going to gather community input for projects and for some of those elements moving forward? So, and how can we really achieve this healthier city? How can we have those benefits of trees be provided to all of our residents so that they can have the benefits of trees that Dr. Jarrett laid out, as well as other ones that we know of in terms of, increased habitat for wildlife, and improved conditions for, slowing traffic and other things that have these impacts on our neighborhoods. So we're developing this urban forest management plan, and we're actually about to kick off a community engagement campaign related to that, because part of developing the plan will be, again, as I mentioned, getting that feedback from residents. And so in January, we'll be having a series of workshops in neighborhoods across Los Angeles to get feedback from folks in person, as well as having a survey that folks can fill out. And the survey and the workshop materials are being translated into multiple languages based on the feedback of our community partners that are going to be helping us deliver those workshops. So just FYI, we want to hear from all the folks that live in LA, what trees mean to them, why they're important, what concerns they have, what areas they wish the city would prioritize. That's what we're going to be looking to get feedback on. So, and this project that we're doing for the Urban Forest Management Plan is being done in partnership with LA County. LA County is also developing their first management plan. We're developing ours. And instead of working separately, we're working together. And we're doing that for 2 reasons. One is so that we take the best practices and make sure we're applying them across the whole region. The trees themselves don't know if they live in the city or county, but the best practices for how we take care of trees and plan for trees is the same, right? We live in the same area. We have generally similar conditions. So we're working together to make sure that we're aligned on best practices and providing that regional leadership. And making sure that we're talking so that if a new pest or disease that could impact our trees in our urban forest comes online, that we can coordinate better to move quickly to address it. The other reason we're partnering with the county is because we know that we're going to be better off doing joint community engagement and education campaigns. We want to make sure that we're maximizing public resources and not exhausting our residents by having separate meetings. We want to hear from folks together, and we also want to do education together rather than developing our own separate campaigns, both now and in the future. So if we're sharing information with residents, we want to be collaborative. So we're partnering with the county, which is really exciting. And the last thing I'll just share is one of the big components within the UFMP, that's what we are how we're referring to the Urban Forest Management Plan, UFMP, for short, is not just looking at those 4 pillars of urban forest management, but we're also looking very specifically at the issue of tree canopy equity. The images that Dr. Jarrett showed you that not every neighborhood in the city has access to trees and green space and all the benefits they provide. And so we're laying out what our equity strategy as a city is going to be, and not just looking at the distributional equity of making sure every neighborhood has healthy, adequate shade for their public health needs, but also looking at recognitional and procedural equity, making sure that everyone has access to help inform plans in their neighborhood, and making sure that we're really recognizing things that have happened in the past in those neighborhoods and the different efforts of different groups in those communities. And so with our equity work, we've been partnering with 2 different groups over the past, I want to say 3 years at this point. The Urban Forest Equity Collective, which has been led by City Plant and Tree People. I know that Marcos is on the call. They're one of the partners in that collective. It's a large group of folks that have been working on a variety of research questions and helping us prioritize where we need to have certain interventions happen first, and how we do good interventions that are going to result in adequate shade for residents. And then the second partnership was with the University of Southern California, USC, their Urban Trees Initiative, and their website, I'm happy to drop in the chat, has a lot of information helping us look at a couple different pilot neighborhoods and thinking about equity criteria. Again, how do we prioritize the areas that have the most need, and how do we do interventions that give us sufficient shade at the end of the day? And the reason that's important is most of the neighborhoods that don't have adequate tree canopy cover, not enough trees, not enough shade, have really small locations available for tree planting. So you think about the neighborhoods you go in where it's all concrete sidewalks, or maybe that grassy strip between the sidewalk and the curb is only 2 feet or 3 feet or 4 feet wide. I can only have city crews plant small trees in those locations, not just small when they're planted, but when they grow to their mature size. We can't have trees in those small spaces that are going to uplift the sidewalk or grow into the building or grow into power lines. So we have to plant really small trees there. And those don't provide us the same benefits. We want large tree canopy covered. We want large areas covered by shade when people are walking in their neighborhoods. And the benefits provided by large stature tree species are significantly greater, exponentially greater than small stature tree species. But the neighborhoods that don't have a lot of shade to begin with only have small spaces for us to plant. And that's part of the reason we've been partnering with these 2 research projects, is to help us understand, where should we be doing something different? Where should our design within the city potentially shift to accommodate more access to high quality green space in our neighborhoods? How do we do that in a really thoughtful way that includes the community input? we're not going to come in and change the design of the neighborhood without talking to the residents and understanding their priorities. And then also, how can we be really strategic about where we can get that maximum benefit when we do have new investments? Because currently, if we plant the existing available spaces in those neighborhoods, we may not get to the canopy that we think we need in order to have a healthy, resilient Los Angeles. So I've gone a little bit long, but thank you so much for having me, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end.
Thank you. And we have 3 more speakers, so we have to be mindful of the time, but we want to allow Dr. Jarrett to speak. He has something to say.
Yeah, I just had a question about whether you're considering the trees that emit less pollen, and perhaps trees that emit lower levels of precursors to air pollution formation, and to offer that we could certainly get students working on that to identify those species if that's helpful to you.
I'll just say in response, those criteria are existing data sets that we have within our tree species, a draft tree species selection guide for the city, but be happy to connect with you further to see if there's additional information or research that we could benefit from. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Some people in the neighborhoods are not really welcoming of trees, and I know this because Amy Schulenberg from sanitation told me that when we went out in the field here in Boyle Heights, where I live, which is one of the shade-starved neighborhoods of LA, some people think, oh, it's going to make a mess. It's going to be a problem for my property, or it's going to give me trouble, or, simply some people destroy trees, just young people, maybe burn trees. How are we going to address that issue? And you talked a little bit about that education, but how do you educate?
Yeah, so I think there's going to be two things. One is the UFMP document is going to talk a little bit about what education we need to do in the future, what kinds of education campaigns we may need to roll out to help people better understand why trees are important and why we should keep them healthy and in place. But I will say that some of those feelings, my experience, and I know Marcos has also had these experiences, is that when we talk to community members, there is frustration because the trees haven't been maintained. The existing trees have not been well maintained always by the city. And that is, again, one of those 4 areas I say we have to be focused on. If we aren't doing that maintenance piece, we lose some of that public trust. And so the city has been adding additional crews for tree trimming and tree inspection, but we have more that we may need to do there in order to meet the industry standard, which is to visit trees and inspect them and trim if needed every 5 to 7 years. The city's current cycle is closer to 18 years. And so this maintenance issue and having adequate maintenance will, I think, improve some of the public opinion of trees alongside public education. And again, having some listening and making sure that we're aligned with the priorities of the neighborhoods we're working in.
Thank you, Rachel. There's a question in the chat about the schools, and I know the school district is working on its own plan, but we're going to move on. If you want to respond in the chat, that's great. Thank you, Rachel. Marcos Trinidad from Tree People, welcome.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah, we're
Yes.
good.
Loud and clear.
Testing. Can I just say how grateful I am to have Rachel in that position? How awesome is that? And I'm also happy to be here and chatting with everyone. I think both of the presenters have made my job a lot easier just with presenting. In the case of being able to not have to go over there. I know we have a certain amount of time that we're being allocated, and I think the folks on this panel can talk all day about this, and that is the thing that I think gets us to a point where we're not just passionate about this, we're looking at ways to be able to address these issues and how it works. So now that you all have received like the why and what the city's doing, I can talk about Tree People a little bit in the sense of what one organization is doing there amongst many to get us to where we need to be. Again, one thing is Tree People has been around for quite a long time. We are in our 50th year. So that is exciting. And we started out with this idea of, getting people to get together and take that personal responsibility, plant trees. It was a very at the time a hippie way of doing things, which I think is pretty awesome. And it started this really great movement within Los Angeles. And over the years, we got to a space where we're becoming more familiar with our landscape. And we are becoming more familiar with the needs of our communities. And we realized if we were going to make any drastic change in addressing some of these issues that are coming out with climate change and just everything else that rolls within Los Angeles County, we needed to start prioritizing the areas that need trees the most. And so Tree People has taken a step in prioritizing those areas. Again, the areas in need have been identified. We have been able to see maps of it and or of these areas. And just to shout out a couple of them, it's the Northeast Valley, South LA, Southeast LA areas, like Boyle Heights, and what we're doing now in partnership with a lot of local nonprofits, but also the city, is getting to a place where we can not only identify those locations, but identify the neighborhoods that we'd like to work in with a much more holistic approach. And what I mean by that is it's not just tree people going into an area and doing the work. It's tree people bringing opportunities to the communities in ways of jobs, education, like the environmental education, awareness, I should say, and then the education around how to be able to build around the urban forest. Again, there are priorities in these areas, and the priorities might not have trees or urban forests way up on top. So it's not that we're going into areas and saying, "Hey, you should be thinking about your trees." I often say, as I'm a bird watcher, and what great way to look at birds is in areas where you have trees. But I often say, if you could wake up in the morning and the first thought that comes up in your mind is, which bird am I gonna see today? You're waking up with a level of privilege, and our community members don't all have that. My goal is to get them that privilege. I want people to wake up and think about which bird they're gonna see today, which tree they're gonna get to experience today. I know it's gonna be a lot of work, but we are committed. And if it's one tree at a time, we're going to go ahead and do that. So a couple of things that we're looking at as being a process for us as well as an organization of growing. We realized that the volunteer model has been what has amplified our work. What we are now looking at is a hybrid model. So we continue to do that volunteer aspect, but we are now looking at workforce development. We need to be able to pay people to do this work, and we need to work with the industry to make sure that we're pushing back on best practices. We need to make sure that we are understanding the needs as Rachel was identifying those pillars. Yeah, we're all about that. Maintenance is huge. Also, preservation. If we're cutting down large trees and replacing them with small trees, we're not really doing ourselves the service or doing what is needed. So understanding that this needs to be a holistic approach. So currently we do have a model that is allowing us to seek funding that is supporting jobs across the board. We're able to bring folks in at the community level, give them training, experience, and amplify our message as far as being able to continue what is needed to have a sustainable urban forest. One thing that we're also doing, and what is allowing us, I know we're specifically talking about LA County, but a lot of what we are looking at for us and what is part of our mission is being able to share our process with the rest of the world. And even though Inland Empire might seem like a whole nother world, we are currently in Inland Empire, Antelope Valley, and we're able to do this work as well and really get to a point where we're able to plant a ton of trees and have a community investment that is going to be lasting. So yeah, I would love to answer questions at the end, but I do want to keep on my time.
Marcos, there was a question sent to me regarding the issue of whether birds live in hoods without trees. And I live in a street that is very narrow in Boyle Heights, and all I see are vultures in the power lines. So please tell me, how are we going to work on this? And do palm trees help at all? We have a lot of palm trees, but as far as I can tell, they don't really help with this.
And not to I mean, palms are very polarizing, and I don't want to start fights. So one thing I will do, when we take birds into consideration, they are indicator species. They do tell us the health of areas. And if you are seeing a particular bird in your area, knowing about the bird and the diet and what the bird requires to survive is really important. Because if you're seeing vultures, that's kind of spooky. And another thing is, and just in the sense, because vultures rely on eating animals that are dead. It might be that there's an area, an open space where they're able to get that, and they're just kind of roosting, which happens out in Ontario, where there are trees that have 80 vultures that roost, and then they go out into the open fields. But one point I'd like to make, folks that I speak with in the community often are like, all I see are pigeons. They're rats with wings. And what I say to them are understanding the habits of pigeons are very important, because pigeons are resilient. They eat everything that we eat. So if you're upset because you're only seeing pigeons, then look at our own diet habits, because they're eating the French fries that we're throwing on the ground. They're eating the garbage. They're taking baths in the runoff water that we're allowing ourselves to shed. But the other thing is, they will also thrive in a healthy environment. So for us, we do know that the diversity of birds have a direct connection with where there is an abundance of trees. And a friend, Dr. Eric Wood, and his team out of Cal State LA they have put out a paper on this, and I'll drop it in the link when I get a chance, or drop it in the chat when I get a chance. But it is great just talking about how you can see the data now with historic redlining, and where there was investment to have a robust tree canopy, and how the birds are moving through urban environments to use those spaces. Now, getting to palms provide a different service. I don't think anyone should ever give up a space for a tree, a proper tree with a huge canopy, to plant a palm. But I myself do not plant palm, or I don't plant palms, period. But I also don't cut down palms because they're palms. They do provide a service in terms of some birds like hooded orioles, barn owls, woodpeckers, and it's because of their height and their abundance.
Thank you, Marcos. We are moving on because we have two more speakers, and so I welcome Zan from the Los Angeles Neighborhood Land Trust.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bees with the LA Neighborhood Land Trust, as Pilar said. Thank you so much, Marcos and Rachel and Michael and John and everyone for being here. I will be also speaking sort of from a perspective of one organization among so many and what are some of the strategies and tactics that we use around this issue. And we actually collaborate with Marcos and Tree People on many projects. So just a little bit of background information about the LA Neighborhood Land Trust. We are a nonprofit, and we've been around since 2002. And since over the last 20 plus years, we've created about 30 parks and gardens, serving over 500,000 LA County residents. And in total, it's about 21 acres of green space, public green space. These spaces range from very small pocket type parks, like 0.15 acres, all the way to 8.5 acres, which is our biggest park to date, Wishing Tree Park, down in West Carson, that will be opening in a month or so. Out of that 30 parks and gardens, about 14 of them are managed by us directly year-round, and that serves about 360,000 LA County residents annually. that means that the other parks are usually parks that we have built in partnership with usually municipalities, City of Los Angeles, smaller cities within LA County, or parks that we have helped in developing and then passed off. So Wishing Tree Park, we will pass off to LA County after we finish the construction. And I think the other panelists have done a phenomenal job of establishing the why, as Marco said as well. But I wanted to uplift one document that we often reference from Trust for Public Land. It's their Park Score Index that they do annually. You know, we, out of the 100 most populous cities in the United States, Los Angeles ranks 80th out of 100, which is a very not great. We can do better in that by far. And out of that in particular, you know, they kind of break down the data as the other panelists have done as well, showing that non-white communities have far less access to park space. I think 64% less nearby park space than those who are living in white neighborhoods. Or if you want to slice it by class, lower income communities have about 66% less nearby park space than more affluent or higher income neighborhoods. So, you know, our perspective is there's a real need not only to create more public green spaces, you know, and we're talking about parks and gardens to be a part of the ecosystem of the, you know, and part of the urban forest canopy that the other panelists have spoken of. So not just to do this, but to do it explicitly from an equity and justice lens, so that all communities, especially those who have historically and thus intentionally been under-resourced, actually have the access to green space, to the benefits of safety and wellness outdoors, all of those studies that Dr. Jarrett shared earlier. And this also means going the extra mile with our projects. So not just saying, here's a plot of grass for, you know, here's a lawn, but, you know, but going the extra mile with climate resilience, with drought tolerant plants, with a universal design serving community members who have various disabilities or mobility challenges, and, you know, and justice in general in all realms of our lives. So, you know, I'll kind of share a little bit more from 3 core pillars that we practice from, and I'll put that in the chat. The first pillar is community engagement and advocacy. The second is park design and development. And the third is park and garden stewardship. So thinking across space and also across time. And I'm actually going to start with stewardship because the conversation about maintenance is really exciting to me in terms, you know, to reframe as one of stewardship. So of the parks that we ourselves own and maintain, right, operate and maintain, we steward them through a practice of hiring park stewards from within each neighborhood where those parks and gardens are located. So these are part-time employees that work approximately 10 hours or so a week, but they really become and lead, you know, in their communities, strengthening connections between residents, between our stewardship network, between us and our community partners and municipalities. So they are the folks who are, you know, really allowing these public green spaces to thrive and to serve beyond just being some kind of green oasis. Additionally, you know, in our stewardship pillar, we think a lot about our youth, and so we have operated a garden apprenticeship program, or the GAP program we call it, since 2013. Have worked with over 350 students in South LA in 9th through 12th grade, really thinking about how we can arm the next generation with the knowledge and skill sets to operate in park equity and food sovereignty spaces. You know, developing leadership skills, public speaking skills, and understanding of how we got here so that we can understand how to move forward. Less so on the youth side, we also have practiced a Park Equity Leadership Academy since 2015, I believe, which has been more of a training program for folks, any community members who want to participate in the kind of work that we're doing. And I can speak to more of that to anyone who's interested off of this call. In terms of park design and development, and I'll say that I acknowledge that myself as a project manager, this is where a lot of the work that I do comes into play. My background is as a community organizer, but I'm also licensed as an architect in California. And so, you know, how do we implement is the big question. How do we connect funding sources, outreach and community engagement, you know, in relationship with communities, and actually, you know, break ground and move through design and construction phases to transform acres of space, you know. So that is work that thankfully we never do alone. So one example that we're really excited to be a part of is the South LA Eco Lab, which we're part of alongside Marcos and Tree People, you know, and a lot of other partners in South LA. We also have exciting projects across the county right now. We have a small park we're working on with the city of Hawthorne. We have projects in the works in Maywood, in Cudahy, and also in Watts. One of the ways that we are able to leverage our strengths is through a project that perhaps John will touch on too, which is the LINK program, which is Link Advocates, Governments, Families, and Parks. So we are part of 2 of those projects where we are partnered as a nonprofit with more technical expertise with a community-based organization that has the relationships in those areas. So Link South LA is one of our partnerships, and Link Southeast LA is one of our partnerships as well. And the idea is, you know, when municipal agencies or other governmental entities are, you know, themselves under-resourced or don't have the capacity to build and renovate multi-benefit parks, how do we pull in all of these types of actors, nonprofits with technical expertise or community-based organizations with these really strong relationships to place? How do we all kind of find our position in there? I think I'm running a little short on time, so I'll say one more thing about community engagement and advocacy. You know, as I mentioned, that, you know, we never work alone. We're part of a lot of coalitions. So I'll just name 2. One is the LA Living Schoolyards Coalition, which I think some folks, I'm like not reading the chat, but I saw some people were talking about greening schoolyards. It's something we do a lot in coalition. We are active. We have a memorandum of understanding that with LA Unified School District, which is a valued partner for us, and we have done many schoolyard greening projects where we're taking out asphalt and actively putting in climate resilient and kind of like culturally specific and well-loved amenities. The other one that I'll mention is La Rosa, which is LA Regional Open Space and Affordable Housing Collaborative, through which we've been working across sectors, you know, with the 100-acre partnership, which is, you know, city, county, state entities, as well as community-based organizations in Northeast LA to combat and mitigate green gentrification. So understanding that we can build parks, but we have to continuously advocate and collaborate to make sure that those who were most impacted by environmental injustice are those who get to stay, remain in place, thrive in place, and have access to those high quality parks once they're built. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Peace. And yes, we are running short on time. Thank you so much, because you gave us a lot of ideas. Those projects all sound like great things for journalists to cover and do stories with. But I'm going to welcome, to wrap up, our partner in this project, John Christensen, who's assistant professor at the UCLA Institute of the Environment, and he was at the UCLA Luskin Center for Innovation, and he was the founder of the Laboratory for Environmental Narrative Strategies. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Pilar, and thank you all for being here and for being interested in this really crucial subject. I thought it was fun that Michael Jarrett started with the slide of the evolution of human beings. We are increasingly an urban species. As of 2007, more than half of us live in cities, and that's expected to go up to 70% by 2050. Cities are our habitat. Urban ecosystems have also become an important area of research in the sciences, the social sciences, and humanities, as well as in policy and public investment around the world. We not only realize that cities are complex ecosystems and it's important to understand them, we also realize we need to invest in them for resilience to climate change for human beings and other species. And we understand that inequities have shaped the urban environment and continue to, and that justice requires that we remedy those inequities. It's a matter of life and death, as Dr. Jarrett's research has shown. Los Angeles is a laboratory for understanding urban ecosystems and understanding inequities, and for learning how to remedy those inequities. A lot of the great work that you heard about today is all about that. We heard from the chief forest officer and tree people about the need to prioritize communities of highest need, and planting trees is not enough. Communities need support, resources, organizing, and power. We heard from the LA Neighborhood Land Trust about the important roles played by nonprofits and community-based organizations in building power and capacity of communities alongside city agencies. We also heard about the importance of equitable community development strategies to ensure that families, neighborhoods, communities can thrive in place and not be displaced by green gentrification, a global concern too. These models are being tested and proven in Los Angeles. Billions of dollars are being invested in urban greening and across the country with the infrastructure bills that were passed in recent years. To bring it down to California, $100 billion is going to be spent on green infrastructure, urban greening, and climate resilience and climate adaptation and mitigation in California in the next several years. Half of that coming from the federal government and half of it coming from the state. A lot of these investments are guided by what is known nationally as Justice 40. And we have similar prioritization here in California, that the most disadvantaged communities, the lowest 40%, should be prioritized for these good investments because they've historically not been, and have often actually been divided or displaced by infrastructure investments. And you have the power to tell these stories and help ensure your communities benefit and are made stronger and more powerful and healthier as these kinds of investments come to your communities. At UCLA, we are supporting many of these efforts with research, and that's part of what we're doing also today as part of a project with Ethnic Media Services. That'll be a year-long project on urban greening. And we are ready to support you in your work with research, analysis, connections to sources, as we embark on this year-long collaboration through Ethnic Media Services and with our Laboratory for Narrative Strategies on urban greening. We'll be sending 2 sidebars you can use, and please, if you would like, in your coverage of these subjects that we've discussed today, health and urban greening, and how to plant and care for urban trees. And please consider us a resource as you work on stories about urban greening in Los Angeles, in California, in the United States, and around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'm going You go to each of the speakers again for a last question, and it's going to be a question a little bit off of left field. So can you, each of you, please tell us why you love trees? Professor Jarrett?
Yeah, I just find that I'm completely innately attracted to them, and I don't know why. So it's that mystery that makes me really love trees.
Rachel?
It's a loaded question for an urban forester and arborist, but I'll say that being around trees makes me feel better. And when I can go to a local park and look up and see all the branches and leaves and the symmetry, and when flowers fall to the ground, it's like a carpet under the tree that's like equally spaced, but no one did, you know, the tree just dropped the flowers and made this beautiful mosaic. It makes me feel better. It brings out that sense of wonder, in addition to, you know, all the technical benefits, but it just makes me feel good.
Thank you. Marcos?
Yeah, thanks for the question. You know, I could say like all the shade. I mean, as you can see out my window, I have sun coming in. It helps me, and I'm able to like check out all the birds in the tree. But I think what I'm going to lean on is I love fruit. And so when I have trees that are giving me something that I can eat, I mean, I'm all for it. So avocados, persimmons, oranges, citrus, all that stuff. That's why I love trees.
Please.
I have an avocado tree in my yard, whom I love. I will say that, you know, we're part of the same ecosystems, the same planet. So their survival, the tree's survival, is our survival. And so just sort of on a baseline level of like, you know, thriving together and reciprocally, and allows us to have the futures that we are working towards as well.
John?
Well, I would just echo what everyone has said here in the whole conversation today. Trees and urban green spaces give us so much. We need to work at giving back and making sure that everyone has access to those benefits in their lives, which are real.
Thank you, everyone. And I'm going to welcome our director, Sandy Cloche. She's going to tell us a little bit about the sponsorship for this project that we're initiating and where it's going to involve you, ethnic media reporters. Sandy?
Thank you. And thanks to our speakers. This has been a really uplifting opportunity to think about the role of trees and the link to life and death issues as journalists allows us a real news hook to explain this is more than we thought. This is a real issue of life and death. I want to call out the Bezos Earth Fund for giving us a supportive grant that allowed us to hold today's meeting, and more importantly, fund a fellowship program moving into 2024, where our reporters for the Los Angeles region will be able to really move deeper into this subject of urban forests and the role of trees and public spaces and parks. The Bezos Earth Fund slides, which we will send to everyone on this call, explain their $400 million commitment nationwide to creating green spaces. But for us, this opened a very rare opportunity. We know ethnic media have long prioritize environmental topics. It's been very difficult for the kind of funding we receive to support coverage of health issues, education issues, many other issues. Now, Bezos has given us an opportunity to connect the importance of urban greenery and urban forests to health. So each of our speakers, we hope we can return to you. We hope our media colleagues will understand your great value as sources for us. And we will be in touch with everyone in our network to talk about this unique opportunity to expand our coverage of the environment, and especially give voice, I think, for many of us to our love of trees. Thank you all for joining, and thank you, John, for your summary, and Pilar for your moderation. Rachel Malarick, you are the first, I guess, urban forestry person, which our media in other cities may now begin to question why their cities don't have someone like yourself. Tree people, we are so glad to reconnect with you and look forward to working with both you and Biz Zhang and other nonprofits so we can make this truly a Los Angeles showpiece for community engagement. The idea that community engagement is critical to the success of urban greening is your 4 lessons, Rachel, I'll take away from this event, along with the message that this truly is a life or death issue for our cities and their residents. Learned a lot. Thank you so much. And our conference is now closed.
And so in our office, we talk about what I refer to as the 4 pillars of urban forest management for the city of LA. And those are planting, which is the one that people frequently think of, let's plant more trees. But the others are equally important. If you don't have all 4, you don't have a healthy urban forest. So we have planting is one, maintenance, how are we taking care of the existing trees in our public right-of-way, our street trees, and in our parks? How are we preserving? So preservation is the 3rd one. How are we preserving existing trees in place when we have new construction, when we have new development? In general, how are we keeping trees in place so that they continue to provide those tremendous benefits to residents? And the 4th one is engagement. And that's acknowledging that in a city, people are a huge part of the urban forest. They can either help the trees be healthy and stay in place, or can have negative impacts. And a lot of people have feelings about trees in their communities. I don't get a lot of feedback on, what maybe another piece of infrastructure like a fire hydrant or a street light. People may care if those work or don't work, but they don't care as much what they look like. But trees, people have a strong opinion about what kinds of trees and how those trees behave in their neighborhood.
Who developed these very small area, these are known as census tracts, estimates of life expectancy. And across Los Angeles, it goes from 68 to 93 years. So if we're somewhere in the south central area, it's about 68 years. When we go up into Malibu, it goes up to 93 years. And you can see that when we look at the satellite retrieval at 0.6 of a meter resolution for green space, that there's a lot of variability. And you can see how that plays out in a residential neighborhood on this slide. You can also see that the park need is unevenly distributed, and at least visually, it looks like it's correlated with life expectancy. So when we did our statistical models, we found very consistent associations between the presence of tree canopy and life expectancy. So more trees, we saw increases in life expectancy. And there's a real environmental justice implication here, because many of the neighborhoods that are underserved for parks and green space are populated by Black and Latinx residents. About 122,000 or almost 123,000 of those life expectancy years gained. If we brought everyone up to the county level median or about the average of green space, would go to Latinx and Black residents.
The conversation about maintenance is really exciting to me in terms, to reframe as one of stewardship. So of the parks that we ourselves own and maintain, right, operate and maintain, we steward them through a practice of hiring park stewards from within each neighborhood where those parks and gardens are located. So these are part-time employees that work approximately 10 hours or so a week, but they really become and lead, in their communities, strengthening connections between residents, between our stewardship network, between us and our community partners and municipalities. So they are the folks who are, really allowing these public green spaces to thrive and to serve beyond just being some kind of green oasis. Additionally, in our stewardship pillar, we think a lot about our youth, and so we have operated a garden apprenticeship program, or the GAP program we call it, since 2013. Have worked with over 350 students in South LA in 9th through 12th grade, really thinking about how we can arm the next generation with the knowledge and skill sets to operate in park equity and food sovereignty spaces.
We realized if we were going to make any drastic change in addressing some of these issues that are coming out with climate change and just everything else that rolls within Los Angeles County, we needed to start prioritizing the areas that need trees the most. The city is getting to a place where we can not only identify those locations, but identify the neighborhoods that we'd like to work in with a much more holistic approach. And what I mean by that is it's not just tree people going into an area and doing the work. It's tree people bringing opportunities to the communities in ways of jobs, education, like the environmental education, awareness, I should say, and then the education around how to be able to build around the urban forest. Again, there are priorities in these areas, and the priorities might not have trees or urban forests way up on top.
Thanks for watching DTVNN. Keep watching, like, share, comment, and subscribe.